When it comes to Final Fantasy, there is one thing that we can always agree upon, and that is when a new Final Fantasy is released, that the music is going to hit, and it's definitely going to hit strong. So in today's video, I have the challenge of ranking the mainline Final Fantasy soundtracks. Are you going to agree with me? Are you not going to agree with me? That's what makes this interesting. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got your covered timestamp, so if you want to skip to a certain Final Fantasy to see where I rank it, then feel free to do so. You can even skip to the very end and just see the final result. I will allow you to do that, but don't you dare comment in that comment section down below and disagree with me when you don't know the context of how I got to that decision. But all I ask is for you to support the channel and hit that like button, and if you want to stick around for some more Final Fantasy content, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. And we are definitely going to be going into some banging soundtracks today. And talking of bangers, allow me to talk to you about instant gaming. By using the link down below, you can get some Final Fantasy games at incredible prices, and there is such a range to choose from. Whether it's the Pixel remaster, you'll be saving 38%. If you want to have a road trip with the boys, you can get Final Fantasy XV at 61% off. Or if you want to play something a little bit more recent, you want to play some Final Fantasy Rebirth, I've got you covered because that is 46% off. Not only that, the folks at Instant Gaming have hooked us all up with a giveaway. We're going to be doing one of these every single month. So if you want the chance of winning any game on the website, enter that giveaway. You won't be disappointed. Okay, all of that is out the way. Let us rank these soundtracks, and we're going to start off with the original Final Fantasy I, the beginning. A lot of themes stemmed from this and carried on throughout the series, but we need to be critical. The way I'm going to rank these is I'm not going to just look at the tracks that I like. I'm looking at the whole soundtrack. Are there memorable sounds on this soundtrack? Can I recommend a soundtrack for someone to listen to? And Final Fantasy I, though it does have so many damn good tunes, it stemmed the main theme, the prelude, the battle bassline, the victory fanfare, the item pickup. There's so many nice sounds in here. Is it a good soundtrack? I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you like 3 of my favorite tracks of each Final Fantasy that we're going to go over. And for Final Fantasy I, I've got to go to Matoi's Cave for sure, because that is a bop. We also have, I'm going to go with, you know, the world map theme. That always gets me that sense of adventure. And then to finish off, I've got to go with Mount Gulag, because I'm just a sucker for that theme, especially the theme that we got when it came to the PS1 versions. But where does it rank? I am going to put Final Fantasy I as a whole as a B tier soundtrack. I'm playing it safe. So let's move on to Final Fantasy II. Say what you want about the game of Final Fantasy II and how it plays, going into empty rooms and there not being anything there, and taking 3 steps over there and having an encounter so often. We should be all acquainted with the battle theme, right? And the victory theme of Final Fantasy II. But Final Fantasy II does have some damn good tracks. I really like the main map theme. I think it's probably one of the best world map themes out there. I also like the Pandemonium theme. And if I was to pick a third one, and I want you guys to chime in down below as well of your favorite tracks, I think I'd have to go with the Ancient Castle. I really like the because it's also the Bravely Default battle theme as well. But where does Final Fantasy II rank as a whole? I mean, there's only a few memorable tracks for me personally. Man, maybe I should be safe and put it on in B, but I think I'm gonna shuffle this around a little bit and put 2 in C, and I think I'm gonna also put 1 in C as well, with these being the earlier soundtracks. That's where I'm going to rank. Actually, you know what? I'm bringing 1 back up to B. Let's move on to Final Fantasy III. Now, when it comes to these soundtracks, I think the Pixel remaster, especially 1 through to 6, really pushed up some of these themes. Not all of them, but a lot of them really have good arrangements in the Pixel remaster. And I guess I wasn't clear on what I was basing this off. I'm just basing this off all versions, every version. Would I listen to this soundtrack on repeat? Would I finish up this video and lock on and listen to some Final Fantasy III? Probably not. Final Fantasy III is the Final Fantasy that I have the least attachment to. Final Fantasy III does have iconic themes. I like Eternal Wind. We all like Eternal Wind. I like the Crystal Tower, and I like the battle theme. Apart from that, I can't really name a lot off the top of my head. Me personally, it is a weaker soundtrack, so for that reason, 3 is going to be going into that D tier. So as we've gone through the games, it's gone down in rank. Is that going to change when we look at Final Fantasy IV? Final Fantasy IV is the first Final Fantasy that had a real story, a lot of characters to throw around and get to know, a lot of them dying and coming back to life. But that's just a personal gripe of mine. But when it comes to the music, there are some iconic themes. And 3 themes I'm going to name is I am a fan of the battle theme, I like the Red Wings theme, and I also like the Lunar Whale theme. And there is other themes as well. We've got the theme of love. I like the boss battle theme because it keeps the battle baseline. You know what? I'm liking the Final Fantasy IV soundtrack as I'm going through it. I think Final Fantasy IV, for me, though not memorable, it is definitely a good listen, and I think I'm going to pull it above 1 in B tier. So next, we're going to move on to Final Fantasy V. For those that know me and watch the content regularly, you will know that I like Final Fantasy V. I find it a very enjoyable game, a game that you can have different experiences with each time because there's so much you can mess around with. Not only that, I feel that Final Fantasy V, Fu Uematsu, I feel like he really entered his progression rock phase, his prog rock phase, and there are some bangers. And I've got to go with the opening theme, Four Hearts. I like the battle theme. I like Battle at the Big Bridge. I think that is one of the most iconic tracks of all Final Fantasy. There's Dear Friends. I like the mountain theme. I can't remember the track name off the top of my head, maybe To the North Mountain or something like that. But these Pixel remaster versions really bring out this. But I love the Final Fantasy soundtrack and I'll listen to it again and again and again. I never get bored of any of the Final Fantasy V soundtrack. And for me personally, 5 is entering that S tier. So let's move on to the final of the 6, the Pixel games with Final Fantasy VI. Now before I dive into it, I can see you all thinking, Jen, if you don't put this in S tier, I'm afraid we cannot be friends much longer. And I can completely understand, because Final Fantasy VI is an incredible soundtrack. It has such a focus on characters, and I think this is one of the best Final Fantasies when it comes to character themes. Not only that, we have good battle music. Decisive Battle is just such a good track. Dancing Mad is an iconic track. I am a sucker for the opera. I love myself a bit of Maria and all of that. I think Final Fantasy VI just hits all the cylinders. It has a good track when you go to Zozo, and it's like dun 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 dun. And I like the track Phantom Train. It really just perceives each area that you're in so well in its music. It does its characters and locations just chef's kiss. And for that reason, that is going to be shooting straight up to the S tier. It is going to be our number 1 soundtrack as of right now. But now we're going to move on to Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII, it's no secret, I'm Genesis 7. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasies of all time. But the music also resonates with me so well. I could name you any track. I love Anxiety. I love just the way it makes me feel. It gives me anxiety to listen to it, and it sets the scene. I think it's also called Anxious Heart as well. It sets the scene of just the state of the world when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. Those still fighting, Genova. I also like One-Winged Angel, but I'm one of these people that also will say Birth of a God is better than One-Winged Angel. There's so many tracks I absolutely love with Final Fantasy VII. I love all the themes, Cid's theme, Barrett's theme, Tifa's theme, Aeris theme, all of the themes, give it me. Cosmo Canyon. I think we could all agree that Final Fantasy VII has a great soundtrack. I do think it is a pretty damn good soundtrack, and I'm thinking of putting it at bottom S, if not putting it in A. And you're thinking, Jen, that's completely caught me off guard. You just named all these tracks that you absolutely love. And I do. And now I'm asking myself the question, why am I pulling it in A right now? I'm going to pull it in S there behind these, because I can rock out to Final Fantasy V soundtrack, and I can absolutely appreciate Final Fantasy VI soundtrack, and Final Fantasy VII soundtrack is special to me. But let's move on to Final Fantasy VIII. I'm going to say this right now. If you're at this part of the video, I'm not going to lie to you. Final Fantasy VIII, in my eyes, is the greatest Final Fantasy soundtrack, because Uematsu is in his groove here. There is such a range of tracks, from emotional tracks like The Oath to just military bangers like The Landing. I didn't know how to describe it. From operatic, I'm making up words now, compositions like Libertali Fatali, probably pronounced that completely wrong. But then there's the somber tracks like Fisherman's Horizon. There are just so many great tracks, so many great uses of instruments in this. When you get to Esther and just the mechanicalness and the technological sounds that are used, you go through such a journey. Even though there's not specific character themes for characters in Final Fantasy VIII, there is so many good tracks. One of my most favorite, and I know I said I was going to name 3 of my favorite tracks, and as we've gone on, I've named more and more tracks as we've went along. But one of my favorite tracks of Final Fantasy VIII plays a track called Moving. I really like that track, just the way it's really serious, and then as we go out into the water and we're kind of flying, it's like really horrible rendition, but then it goes dun, 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 dun. Just the mixing and the meshing of the 2 different styles of like a more really gritty mechanical type sound. I don't know how to explain it, but then like the feeling of the horizon, the adventure is out in front of us, what do we do kind of feelings. So Final Fantasy VIII, it's no secret, is going straight in S tier. So let's now move on to Final Fantasy IX. The place I will return to someday. I always use that line when I talk about Final Fantasy IX. And Final Fantasy IX has a great soundtrack. I really compare it to Final Fantasy VI because it does character themes incredibly well. I like Garnet's theme. I like Queen's theme. I like Beatrix's theme. Oh, Beatrix's Roses of May. Melodies of Life. Mount Gulag returns. The Gulag volcano is back here. There is so many great tracks. Dark Messenger. Final Fantasy IX has a really good soundtrack, and I think it's pretty much akin to Final Fantasy VI, but I think it just slightly touches it. So I think I'm going to put Final Fantasy IX in S tier behind Final Fantasy VI, because again, I feel like it copied the blueprint of a Final Fantasy VI soundtrack with all these bangers. It doesn't have a dancing mad per se, but there is so many really nice tracks, and it just gives you that sense of Final Fantasy IX does. Does that make sense? But Final Fantasy IX, I think, deserves to be in the S tier. So let's move on to Final Fantasy X. Now, Final Fantasy X definitely has a different feeling soundtrack as we progress through the game. It gives us that sense of adventure, sense of mystery, just a lot of more ambient type music. And when I say ambient, I don't just mean like birds in the background, but more not focused melodies, but melodies that we can hum along to as we're going through Final Fantasy X. A few of the tracks, To Zanarkand's a go-to. Otherworld, if you want, the complete opposite. I'm not a fan of the battle theme, to be fair. I think the battle theme's probably the weakest out of the most of the battle themes when it comes to Final Fantasy X. I do like the victory fanfare though, on the flip side of that one. I like Besaid. There's a lot of good tracks and it tells that journey incredibly well. But for me personally, it doesn't hit on all cylinders. It's a banging soundtrack. I do get emotional hearing that ending theme every time, just because of the piano, and when it comes in every time I get goosebumps, and it just gets to my eye. But when it comes to all of the tracks, like I don't really like Assault and all of those type tracks, and I wouldn't listen to those on repeat. I think Final Fantasy X, for me personally, is a very strong A. a really, really strong A. And before we move on, I need to tell you that I ain't going to be covering Final Fantasy XI because I've not played Final Fantasy XI. So it's your time to let me know. What's your favorite track of Final Fantasy XI and where would you put it in this tier list? Let's move on to Final Fantasy XII. Final Fantasy XII is a very, I'm going to make the comparison. I think a lot of people make the comparison. It's a very Star Warsy, orchestral type soundtrack, very akin to if you had played Final Fantasy Tactics. I have not played Final Fantasy Tactics. Oh no, shock horror. Don't worry, I should be sorting that out soon. But Final Fantasy XII soundtrack, I really could not name you any tracks off the top of my head except like the Streets of Rabanasta. I'm probably missing some tracks that you probably want to throw my way, but I don't think it's very memorable in the slightest, and it doesn't rank very high for me. I'm really debating if it's a low C or a high D, because I do like it better than the 3 soundtrack because it's so orchestral. I could probably listen to it just in the background, but I'm just not a big fan of the 12 soundtrack. And you know what? I'm going to leave it there in D, and we're going to move on to Final Fantasy XIII. Now, if you asked me about Final Fantasy XIII soundtrack a couple of months ago before I decided to tackle the platinum in Final Fantasy XIII, I'd probably name you a few tracks, just the typical ones like Blinded by Light, The Promise, and the Sunlit Waterscape. But after playing Final Fantasy XIII and really being enthralled in the world this time, really throwing myself in the game and appreciating all it has to offer, it's really moved up. Like, there are some absolute banging tracks in Final Fantasy XIII. And I've got a really newfound love for the Final Fantasy XIII soundtrack, and I'm really going to move it up here. I don't think it's an S, but I definitely think it's either a really high B or low A. And I think I'm going to put it in low A for myself personally. Next, we're going to move on to the colossal soundtrack of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I've played Final Fantasy XIV for quite a while. I'm taking a big break at the moment. I've always appreciated the music. I like the throwbacks and I like the new tracks. There has never been a track, well, there's probably a lot of tracks that I don't really like, but at the same time, I feel like on the other side of the scale, there's a lot of tracks that I really do like in Final Fantasy XIV. I think it's definitely a love letter to Final Fantasy as a whole, and I think if you like Final Fantasy music and you haven't played 14, I think giving Final Fantasy XIV's soundtrack a listen, you may really appreciate what it has to offer. So I'm gonna pull it just because, like, to be fair, it's always on my playlists. I feel like it should go in S. You know what, am I lying to myself if I put it in A when I would listen to a Final Fantasy XIV? But I'd want to listen to specific tracks, not the whole soundtrack. So I think, it's a tough one because I don't know what you guys are thinking as I'm thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, Jen, if you said you like it, put it in S. If you don't like it, put it in A. I'm going to pull it in. I'm going to put it in S. I'm going to put it in A. I'm going to put it in A. I think it's a very strong soundtrack, but there are a lot of tracks that I probably would never listen to. But I think it's a very good contender for a good, what do I do? I'm going to put it in S. It's going in S. It's going in S, all right? It's going in S. Let's move on to Final Fantasy 15. Now, I'm currently doing a replay of Final Fantasy XV, and I've got to say, Yoko Shimomura absolutely kills it with the Final Fantasy XV soundtrack. There's a lot of sounds that I love in this soundtrack. There's also the option to listen to all the previous soundtracks that we've spoken about so far. But that being said, I think that there is definitely some standout tracks. One that I've been pointed out to as of recently is Wanderlust, and it made me realize that, man, there's a lot of themes in Final Fantasy 15 that just don't play for long enough. Wanderlust plays and you get into a battle or go into the menu, goodbye. You're gonna have to wait to a random opportunity to listen to it again, but it really is a nice theme, and I've really appreciated the Final Fantasy 15 soundtrack as I've played through it. And I think for that reason, the 15 soundtrack as of right now for me it's an A. I think it's an A. Yes, it's an A, but it's not quite 10. So I'm going to put 15 in A tier, and that might change when I complete the game again, but I'm just refreshing myself, but I'm really enjoying what I'm listening to. So let's now move on to the final Final Fantasy we're going to talk about, and that is Final Fantasy XVI. This is the latest entry of the Final Fantasy franchise, and I really enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy XVI. I thoroughly enjoyed getting the platinum. I'm at a stage where I'm like, would I feel the same if I played it again? And part of me saying like, no. And would that apply to the music for me as well? I really don't know, because there are some standout tracks. There are some bangers. The fact that we go against Titan and it plays the most random thing that we did not expect when playing through Final Fantasy XVI. It completely switched up the soundtrack, but if you know Soken, you know that it's very not a surprise really to listen to a soundtrack like that. There's so many good tracks. I like Find the Flame. I think it's a banging main theme for Final Fantasy XVI. I like The Hideaway, but I couldn't name all of the ambient tracks for you off the top of my head. I feel like there's just a handful of tracks that I really like with Final Fantasy XVI, and then I just kind of disregard the rest. So I think it's definitely one of the weaker ones when it comes to that, and I think I'm going to put it in B tier. I think I'm going to pull it, I'm going to put it in B tier because there's only a handful that I really like. It's not the entire soundtrack, and that's what we're basing it on. And I think that's why I'm going to put Final Fantasy XVI in the B tier. So there we have it, my tier list of Final Fantasy soundtracks. Do you agree with this? I would love to have the conversation. It's a real tough one because I love Final Fantasy music, but I wanted to kind of judge this as the whole soundtrack. And maybe I didn't do a good job with some than others, but looking at that now, I kind of look at that and think, I think that's where I'm at when it comes to the soundtrack, because I never have Final Fantasy 3 or 12 in any of my playlists, unless it's a really good remix of something. But the other soundtracks, I think my S tier is very strong, but I do want to say right now, and you can fight me, and because I'll die on the hill of Final Fantasy VIII being the best Final Fantasy soundtrack. So let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on the soundtracks of Final Fantasies. And again, let me know about Final Fantasy XI, because I've not really listened to the soundtrack. The only time I've heard it is when I've played through games that have thrown back the themes from Final Fantasy XI, like Theatre Rhythm, and I think Final Fantasy XIV might have a few 11 tracks in there as well. So let me know. And also, if you want to get some Final Fantasy games on Steam at a great price, again, use those instant gaming links down below. We do have that giveaway that's going to be ending this month for your chance to win any game you would like on the website. So thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.